that you murdered Hector for his songs?
You don't think that, do you?
When it comes to Pixar villains, we've sentenced toys that became dictators, and even classic superhero villains. But we're not done. There are plenty of other bad guys in the Pixar universe who also need justice delivered upon them. From the land of the dead, to the ocean, to prehistoric times in the raceway. I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and today we're sentencing Pixar villains for their crimes. The movies that we'll be tackling today have a mix of true bad guys and just antagonistic characters. These are the Good Dinosaur, Finding Dory, Cars 3, and Coco. The first movie we'll be talking about is widely considered Pixar's biggest flop, The Good Dinosaur. Now, The Good Dinosaur is one of those movies where it's really hard to actually sentence any of the characters for any sort of crime, mainly because these animals are just trying to eat and survive. And given this was Pixar's biggest flop, let's power through this one quickly and sentence all the baddies at once, mainly because the motivations are all pretty much the same. We have Thunderclap, his flock, Bubba, and his velociraptors. Thunderclap is the leader of a gang of pterosaurs who follow storms to feast on trapped critters. In fact, he's known for eating all kinds of creatures, scavenging on both left-behind corpses, and also living creatures when need be. It's assumed he has dozens of murders under his belt, and it's also shown he may have lost a lot of his self-control as he seems to worship the storms he chases.
I've seen the eye of the storm!
He then proceeds to stalk Arlo throughout the rest of the movie. Thunderclap's flock are a group of pterosaur-esque flying dinosaurs, who are also trying to eat the wandering Arlo. They spend the film trying to convince Arlo they're good guys, only to lull him into a false sense of security. Bubba is a notorious velociraptor thief that is one of the main rivals to Buck, as well as the other tyrannosaurs that Arlo meets later on in the film. Bubba spends a majority of his time stealing from other people, especially Buck. Given the setting and context of The Good Dinosaur, we can't really sentence them for a quote-unquote crime, and instead, we're just going to choose between letting them live or killing them. So we're just going to go ahead and sentence them to death via giant asteroid. And honestly, this movie is forgettable enough that you can probably just nuke Arlo too. Moving on to our next movie, we have the seafaring sequel, Finding Dory. This is a movie that isn't exactly big on the villains. In fact, the only ones we're going to sentence are Fluke and Rudder. Fluke and Rudder are a pair of sea lions labeled A1 and 13 respectively. They honestly don't do a whole lot in the movie, but they do have a couple of criminal actions we need to point out. The majority of their screen time shows them abusing, threatening, and harassing another sea lion that they live around named Gerald. They not only invite him up onto their rock and then proceed to force him off, which seems quite abusive given the fact that Gerald seems to be a tad bit mentally deficient, but the tone of their voice also insinuates threats. Now, these aren't exactly crimes against humanity, but we do sentence these two to apologize to Gerald and to share their rock with him. Another sequel that we'll be discussing is the surprisingly dark Cars 3. The first villain we'll be documenting is Jackson Storm. Storm is a member of the newest generation of racers, who ends up defeating so many members of the older generation, he ends up pushing them out of racing altogether. In fact, the way he races, he seems to despise the older generations in such a way that we could probably label it a hate crime in the context of the Cars universe. He speaks a variety of thinly veiled threats at lightning. In fact, these threats would probably not constitute the legal limit, but we'll count them anyway.
You have no idea what a pleasure it is for me to finally beat you.
However, Storm's main source of attack is psychological warfare. He then proceeds to assault Ramirez by slamming her into the wall, and for those reasons we sentence Jackson Storm to 5 years in prison with a chance at parole on his hands, or wheels. Next up we have Miss Fritter. Fritter is a large bus who runs a mysterious and seemingly illegal demolition derby. Because of how illegal this demolition derby seems to be, that means she would be on the line for any damage or deaths that happen, making her affected by the legal liability for continued assault, attempted murders, actual murders, and property damage that comes out in this event. She also does a large majority of this damage damage herself, which puts her on the line for that. She then proceeds to threaten and attack both Lightning and Cruz at the Derby, but she fails at that. With that said, Fritter does seem to be a pretty chill person all in all, but that doesn't mean that she can skate past her punishment, which will be pretty substantial. 15 years in prison with a chance at parole. Rounding out the Cars 3 docket, we have Sterling Burnish Dunn. Sterling is the secondary antagonist of the movie. He buys the Rusty's medicated bumper oil company that was one of Lightning McQueen's biggest sponsors. Sterling, despite being an antagonist, doesn't do too much criminally. He does psychologically abuse Lightning, trying to convince him not to race because of how old he is. And in fact, one may even call this corporate espionage.
Move on to the next phase and reap the reward.
This is because Sterling seems to be doing these things only to force Lightning into becoming little more than a puppet for advertising. He's also a bit rude as he mocks Cruz for not being a racer and even lightly threatens her. In fact, one may even consider it blackmail as he holds her job over her head if she decides to race. Now, Sterling is mostly an obstacle in an otherwise pretty chill story, so we're gonna hit him with 5 years in prison with a chance at parole. But real quick before we get to our last entry, if you're enjoying the sentencing format, make sure to check out our Cinema Sentencing channel. We'll actually be sentencing characters from live action movies and television series over there, and we'd love to have you go check it out. The final villains we'll be talking about today come from one of Pixar's best movies, that being the amazing film Coco. Not a villain, though still antagonistic. Up next on the docket, we have Grandma Imelda Rivera. Imelda is the great-great-grandmother of Miguel, who he meets during his journey into the land of the dead. And Pepita is Grandma Imelda's alebrije, and acts like a pet and protector to those in the Rivera family. Imelda spends the majority of her time on screen stalking Miguel throughout the land of the dead, along with her giant colorful pet. Now, she has good reasons for this, don't get us wrong, though that doesn't change the fact that Miguel doesn't want her following him around and tells her as such more than once. Plus, there is some strong manipulation. She imposed a strict condition on her great-grandson, Miguel, to never play music again, in order for him to return to the land of the living. If Miguel broke this vow, he would be sent back to the land of the dead, potentially getting trapped if it wasn't the Day of the Dead.
You go home my way or no way.
Essentially, Imelda threatened Miguel's life to uphold her relentless grudge against music, creating a constant threat if he ever indulged in music, even casually. That is some pretty legitimate blackmail. Though because we understand why she does this, and because it all works out for Miguel in the end, we're gonna go ahead and pardon her for her crimes, as it's clearly what he would want. The final criminal on the Coco docket, as well as today's docket in general, we have the now iconic Ernesto de la Cruz. Ernesto is the main villain of the film, where he commits a variety of criminal actions, and will be starting with his smaller charges, those being plagiarism, copyright infringement, and theft, all pertaining to when he stole the backlog of Hector's songs after his death. And this ends up with his legacy being tarnished after it's revealed to the populace. And then there's the fact he poisons Hector's food, murders him for his music, then proceeds to play it for millions to hear. He also commits a mass amount of fraud at the same time, mostly in relation to the infringement and plagiarism earlier, as well as unlawfully imprisons both Hector and Miguel, after he's threatened with what may be revealed.
Take care of Miguel. He'll be extending his stay.
It's also worth noting he abuses others around him, including Hector, commits child endangerment during the final moments of the movie, and even attempts to murder Miguel. He's built up quite a rap sheet not only in the living world, but the land of the dead as well. Because of Ernesto's actions, we have no choice but to sentence him with the death penalty, executing him publicly in very much the same way he perished in the movie, being crushed by a giant bell. For someone who wanted the spotlight in life, that's how he deserves to go out in death. Yeah, there had to be at least one execution on the docket, and you earned it, Ernesto.